The Precondition of Atrocity. In January 2026, federal immigration enforcement operations in Minneapolis and beyond became impossible to ignore, not because they represented a sudden departure from history, but because the stories used to justify them began to fail under their own weight. For some of us, nothing shifted. What changed was visibility. The seams that had long been held together by narrative, denial, and selective attention began to split in public. As a black woman in America, especially one raised in the South, the idea that state power can turn violent, arbitrary, or cruel without warning is not theoretical. It is inherited knowledge. It is lived memory. What has changed is not the nature of power, but the ability of others to continue pretending they did not see it. In Minneapolis, Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old U.S. citizen and mother of 3, was shot and killed by a federal immigration enforcement agent on January 7th while driving near her home. Official explanations were issued quickly, but video footage and eyewitness accounts raised serious questions about the necessity and proportionality of lethal force. Her family and community rejected the government's framing and demanded accountability. Just weeks later, Alex Preddy, a 37-year-old ICU nurse and U.S. citizen, was fatally shot by a Border Patrol agent during an enforcement operation tied to immigration activity. Once again, conflicting narratives emerged. Once again, the public was asked to accept explanations that did not align cleanly with what witnesses described or what video appeared to show. Alongside these killings came the detention of children and families. A 5-year-old boy, Liam Conejo Ramos, was taken into federal custody with his father after returning from preschool, later transferred to a detention facility far from home. School officials, family members, and advocates described the incident as traumatic and destabilizing, particularly given the child's age and circumstances. When mothers and nurses are killed, when children are removed from the ordinary rhythms of their lives and placed behind fences, the abstraction of policy collapses. Not because enforcement suddenly became violent, but because the language used to rationalize it doesn't make sense. For some, this moment feels shocking. For others, it feels familiar. What we are witnessing is not a break from precedent, but the unraveling of the stories that once kept the consequences contained. There is an old warning from Voltaire about moments like this, about what happens when people are taught to accept absurdities long before they are asked to live with their consequences. The moral premise we were asked to accept. What followed these events was not silence. It was justification. Almost immediately the deaths, the detentions, the visible harm were folded into familiar language: necessary, unfortunate, lawful, protective. The public conversation did not center on whether something had gone wrong, but on whether the outcomes could be defended in service of a larger goal. This is where the real fracture appears. Many people were not arguing that harm hadn't occurred. They were arguing that it didn't matter, or more precisely, that it mattered less than the idea being protected. The goal, border control, enforcement, order, was treated as self-justifying, while the method was framed as regrettable but acceptable. That framing requires a specific moral move, separating intention from consequence. It allows someone to say, "I don't like how this looks, but I support it," without sitting with what this actually entails. It permits agreement with a policy while disavowing responsibility for how that policy manifests in real bodies and real lives. This is not neutrality. It is moral outsourcing.